Welcome to another episode of Rhodes to Equity, where there are many paths, but one destination. Our conversations unapologetically elevate BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Dwight E. Rhodes, and we're thrilled to bring you today's show. Using our differences as bridges, not barriers. Our guest, Taliq Tillman, is a former Dartmouth student, activist, actor, and photographer who strongly believes empathy is their most powerful tool. They co-founded Diversity Talks and is committed to fostering open dialogue and understanding. They have been awarded scholarships for their academic achievements and dedication to the values of tolerance and social justice. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to Rhodes to Equity for more inspiring conversations with BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ leaders making a difference. Now, let's jump into our conversation with Taliq.
Hello, everyone. My name is Taliq Tillman. I'm currently doing my undergraduate studies at Dartmouth College, but I'm on academic suspension. So I'm using my natural gifts, abilities, talents, and really taking this time to tap into who I am as a person and hone the skills that I hold dear to myself. And trying to prepare for the career that I want to choose for the next 10 years. Yeah, so right now you can find me sitting in the hop at Dartmouth College as I just came from a job interview that might have me living out here for the next 7 months. And I got here because I did not give up on my now 6-year long undergraduate degree that I'm still determining through. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, we can say a lot about perseverance and stick-to-itiveness and all of those adjectives to describe not giving up. And based on what I know about you, you personify like staying in it and winning it, even when it's difficult. And I love how you entered this space by being completely transparent. Like, okay, I'm on academic probation. And so what? This is what I'm going to do. And I love the fact that you're just walking in your truth. You're navigating. And right now, this was a little bit before our conversation officially started recording, but you shared with me that you're getting your new ID. You're going to change your gender, and you're working with your scarf to determine whether or not they'll actually even let you take your picture with it. But it's just the idea that you're showing up authentically as you, and that's what these conversations are about or intended to be for not only us but everyone listening and watching. Like, how then do you see yourself in a leadership position where you are now? And how might our audience understand the path that you've taken to get where you are right now and where you plan to be? Because what I heard you say is that, like, you just had an interview. You didn't say how you did in the interview, but I can assume that you did extremely well. Like, so what's happening? Like, what was the interview for?
The good interviews don't get done. They keep getting did, okay? You
Okay.
keep, okay? The
Okay.
good interviews don't get done. That's what it feels like. It feels like, okay, there wasn't an ending,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm now establishing like a new relationship with people who actually have care for me, but who also like work amongst me. So that was a really great feeling, because I felt already established in a culture of the leasing housing agency,
Mm-hmm.
because I've lived there in the past. Um, and you said something about leadership, and I'm gonna share a sentiment that I know a lot of other queer people share, but it's like that's why I stare in the mirror longer, like because there was a point where I thought I would die at 22.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I didn't see any people that looked as weird as me fucking living in order to get to 22. So I just didn't like representation wasn't even a want because it was so like far off my queer imagination of seeing someone who looks like me have a position of power and not, oh, you kind of look like the crackhead. You're kind of dressed like the crackhead out on the corner begging for dollars. Because that's kind of the running joke with the girls who dress like the weird. So, yeah.
You know, that says a lot. I'm just thinking about and listening to the words that you're using, like weird, and how you're taking ownership of that. Because when I was your age, not that long ago, but when I was your age, like weird was this negative connotation, but it seems like you're embracing it as you're owning it, like your differences or what makes you unique. Can you say a little bit more about that? Yeah.
We can use the gender neutral restroom solution as a case study here, right? It's not the differences that were causing an issue. It's systemically how the differences were used as tools of oppression. It's a very intentional force of oppression to segregate people. Segregation is used as a tool of oppression. But segregation can also be used as a tool to find common space. What if we separate people based on shirt color and people who wear dark shirts and have to go in one bathroom and people who wear light shirts have to go in another bathroom, and what if it's because there's lights that are glow in the dark? So light shirts glow one way and dark shirts glow the other way. That's the use of segregation, but using imaginative design in order to change public infrastructure. And I want to go back to the whole idea of differences because we talked about, yes, gender is one thing that's different, but gender neutral bathrooms serve as a case study in that people are able to acknowledge if they believe in two genders, or they could acknowledge however many genders they believe in without having to disclose their information, which specifically speaks to the right to our own privacy and the right to our own identities. We should also be able to choose when we want to disclose our identities. Do I want to disclose if I'm a man or a woman here? Is this a space where I even want that information about me known? Whether you're wearing a dark shirt or a light shirt, that's given information. If we had our bathroom segregated on those bases and then did little like bathroom games like that, I'm sure people would like going to the bathroom a little bit more, you know, rather than taking these identity markers that are part of our humanity and forcing us to disclose this information. And I think that's the first step that people usually miss. Like, it's not even about whether you're a man or a woman. We shouldn't even be talking about your private parts. That shouldn't even be public discourse because that's only between you, God, and whoever you want to see your PP in your private parts.
Yeah, I
That's
feel
business.
yeah, well, we agree on that. And that's not the reality in which we live. And a huge part of this podcast is really sort of unpacking and diving deeply into how do we lead knowing that that should be in place. The fact that we should not have to disclose whatever it is that we have between our legs. Like that's our business, right? But how then do we lead? How do we show up? How do we walk in our truth and our authenticity in a way that doesn't allow us to be the target of discrimination and marginalization? Like, so there's legislation that's happening right now. I'm in the state of Louisiana. Like, say what?
Like allowance, right? Just that word. You think we allow marginalization and oppression? It
No.
becomes marginalization and oppression because we don't allow it, but it still happens. You feel me? I just
Yeah.
want to, but
No,
you
I love
say
that.
for Missouri?
Yeah, I love that. And no, I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about what the legislators are doing, the people that we've elected into office to represent us. That's who I'm talking about because at the end of the day, that's what's really that we can have these great conversations about what it means to walk in our authenticity, blah, blah, blah. But what's happening legislatively? And I will say that if we're going to be completely transparent, this is a bit of a sidebar, but my middle brother and I, we had a bit of disagreement, to say the least, where he disclosed to me that he did not vote. And I did not respond really well. That was just not a good leadership moment for me, um, because I thought about the history of the right for us to even have the ability to go and vote, right? And for someone that is directly connected to me, my DNA, my older brother, to tell me that I'm just, I don't bother with that. I don't know how to process that. So it's just like important to me that we hold our legislators who were there to represent us accountable. And so that's what I'm referring to, just to be explicitly clear.
The very act of depending upon another to represent who you are, that works against difference. That works against individuality. We have things already that show self-expression that we see in ghettos, that we see in hoods, that you see in suburbs, like public art, um, even people doing yard sales, public discourse at libraries. This is what shows who the people are. Now, if we have one representative who's disconnected from that at all times, they'll never be able to get that job done and will constantly be enraged and they'll constantly be at odds. So, what I would say is we think about what we value politically more. Maybe we value the vote less. Maybe we value our representatives less altogether. And maybe if everyone valued even the people with like a lot of funding, the people who know super PACs, the people who know NGOs, maybe if they valued public art from people in the projects, maybe if they valued that more, then we'd actually see economic buyback, which then would have a correlation with the political drivers that exist here today in the United States of America.
Once again, you and I, we don't disagree. What I'm hearing is the approach. And I will say that here's a question for you. How then do we hold? Because if I heard you correctly, you said, well, they may never represent us. There are plenty of people in elected office now that just does not represent us at all, right? So what then do we do? I heard what you said in terms of your example of community art. Love it. Lived in a place like Atlanta where community art was completely representative of the communities in which it existed. Beautiful. It's not in place where I am now, but that's a whole other story. But how then do we get to the part where the community expression is actually represented in places of power? And I would argue that the community is a place of power. However, when a law has been enacted by the people who are meant to represent us, they can stymie, they can stagnate, and they can make life very difficult for the people like us living in these communities.
I did this accelerator program when I was about 17 years old, and it's called Hatch, or 18 years old. And basically, I was the Hatch Next Gen. And I met a young man named Royce Mann, and he's from Atlanta, actually. He does politicking there. He's a young politician. Look at Royce Mann. He's probably running for something or campaigning for someone. But he actually taught me about super PACs. Thinking about adding different political forms of organization to our practices of Black and Brown resistance that have gone on for hundreds of years already. What if we had a bunch of super PACs? And what if the Black super PACs, the ones a part of the bourgeoisie, gave direct aid to dark-skinned, disabled, queer Black folk? What if there was a super PAC where that was their only mission? And it wasn't just an NGO, it's not just a nonprofit, but this is then something that's backed by conglomerates but
Mhm.
also still has social dictum and has democratic process of voting, but it's a super PAC instead of a nonprofit. Simple idea, right? Why the fuck don't we have a lot of those? Because it doesn't look sexy within the political sphere. So then we talk about the social barriers and the social and cultural boundaries that just are with entering into quote unquote politics. But the thing is, baby, politics does not have to look any type of way. Politics could look however we want it. And that's
Yeah,
really the
yeah, no, go ahead. I was going to say a little bit more about that. What do you
politics
mean?
can happen anywhere. And if you know that, you know that. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be when you're dressed in a tie, when you have a collared shirt. We both got collared shirts on right now. When you have a collared shirt on, it doesn't have to just be in those moments. Politics could be when you're eating that ramen late night with your grandmother. Politics, I think we've all seen politics can become so interpersonal. Politics can be during intimacy, trying to like hope for something and giving someone a hug, like politics has to exist in those spaces, already does exist in those spaces. And we have to be a lot more intentional about how you want your whole life to be aligned.
You know, you could always add a perspective to the conversation I'm never expecting. And to give the audience a little bit of a background, I know this is better late than never. You want to talk a little bit about how you and I got connected in the first place, how we met, if you
Yeah.
are back?
Yeah. So I think we had met during Startup Weekend Education Highlander stuff. There might have been some introduction through there of you knowing Kiara first and
Mhm.
you being familiar with diversity talks. But I know like when we first started getting acquainted, it was through the Zoom, through the New School Ventures Fund. And we were basically deciding a bunch of really important decisions on who makes money. And yeah, we had to start doing these meetings. And I remember seeing your fancy schmancy glasses and stuff like in the little Zoom boxes. So I definitely clocked. I clocked you and a couple other people when we first were in the group rooms. Um, but I definitely actually was like attentive to what you were saying because you were very poised when you spoke. And yeah, like from there, like we just started doing some one-on-one meetings. I know I needed some guidance at some times, and we in and now. We're here after just getting familiar.
Yeah, which was a few years ago. More context, it was the New Schools Venture Fund. They were there. We were a part of their inaugural equity, racial equity initiative, where
Racial,
that
so yeah,
exactly where they were seeding, um, the grant making to the community, right? And really giving the community an opportunity to have our 2.5 cents on who would receive funding through them. And it was, we were a part of that inaugural group. I think, I don't know, maybe 8 of us or something like that. And now they've continued on, several years. The reason I mentioned that is because when, just like you clocked me, it's like clocking going back and forth. Not that it makes any difference, but just for the audience, I perceived you as um, potentially. You never know if someone's gay or not, But what I thought I was pretty sure about was you being identified as male, right? And owning the pronouns he, him, and I don't even think we were introducing ourselves back then with our pronouns, right? No, so that never surfaced. And the reason this is germane to this conversation is because your authenticity, that the fact that you are willing to, put up with a lot of discrimination. Um, I'm not going to get into unless you want to, like what's been happening with you and your home life, and just navigating those spaces with, intimate relationships with, your mom and your auntie and all of those things. And
so
you've are presenting to me now over the last few years, this transition of like, you know what, I know this is the pronouns that you identify with, you know, she, her, but I always seen you as he, him, and it's an evolution just for me going through this process, and sometimes I screw up with the pronouns, and I always say I want to see, value you, and hear you the way you want to be seen, heard, and valued, and represent those pronouns. And you've been really gracious with me in terms of like, okay, those are not the pronouns I told you. And you know, you help me through that process of making sure that I am embracing all of you in a way that makes you feel seen, heard, and valued as in your humanity. And that is when we find ourselves in those situations, how then, from a leadership perspective, from a perspective of humanity, what then do we do? Like one last question I'd like to posit, and that is, you've talked a little bit about it, but I'd like you to dig a little different, a little deeper. So, what type of world would you dream of that includes folks like us, the LGBTQIA plus community, the queer community, that's completely accepting? What does that world look like to you, and how then do we unlock it?
Yeah, it's just a world that's non-ableist. There's autonomy in that people are able to build and design the world around them. As long as you have that stipulation and that conditional, think about it like a matrix. You could put that stipulation on anything and then have flexibility to change just in case that doesn't work. So then there is no constant wrong. Wrong cannot be an infinite factor if you put the stipulation of autonomy. So beings with autonomy and the right to change. Those are two conditionals that if you put it on anything, anything is possible.
Mm. Yeah.
I think from a design
Well,
perspective, so that's like why, but yeah.
well, I mean, like a dear colleague of mine, I'm not going to quote her correctly, but she says something like, well, you know, these systems of oppression have been intentionally designed. Well, they can be redesigned, and some would argue dismantled, right? So, with that, my dear friend, I really appreciate the conversation. I know you've got 1,000 things to do. Really appreciate you making the time and just being a part of the conversation. We will continue. Until then, be well. And look at you, looking glam. You just had to show off your jeans, huh? I'm
Look
gonna
at
get,
it's what I'm wearing that water tag today. I got my water bag and my water shorts on.
look at you. I'm gonna get, you know what? I'm gonna get me a pair like that because you're not the only one who can rock that. You know, that's just like I'm just letting you know that's not a generational thing. I'm gonna get me a
I'll send
pair.
you the link. I'll send you the link.
Do that. Send me a link, my friend,
Okay.
and we will talk soon.
Of course, Dr. D, thank you so much for your time and energy and peace.
Peace to you too.